So today I'm going to be presenting the Kojiki and its retelling in modern media today. To review, the Kojiki was completed in 1712 CE during the Nara period, which was a time in Japan when Chinese cultural influence was very strong. And this is basically just a fantastical origin story of the country. Um, during a time when Japan didn't really have a national identity, so it was kind of meant to promote national pride and unity in that way. So the piece of media I would like to compare this to is Okami, which is a video game developed by Clover Studio and published by Capcom in 2006. And this is an action-adventure game in which you play as a white wolf named Amaterasu, which you can see in the corner, who's trying to defend a village and restore light to the world overall. And the game's main focus and main villain is an eight-headed beast that you battle, but overall it acts as a very accessible retelling of the Kojiki and the battle with this eight-headed serpent in general. So, in order to understand how the Kojiki was retold exactly, the most important thing to get is the plot. And we all remember the Kojiki, hopefully, which main ideas were that Izanagi and Izanami kind of create Japan and all these deities, and two of their more important children are the sun deity Amaterasu and the storm deity Susanoo. Susanoo is kind of a crazy character and he gets exiled, and one of the main things that he does is fight this eight-headed serpent to save Kushinada, who he then marries. And in Okami, the game starts off with a pretty long prologue in which the mortal man, Izanagi, fights an eight-headed serpent, Orochi, with the help of this white wolf, which is named Shiranui. And they fight this demon in order to save a village, and specifically Izanagi's lover, Izanami. So they successfully beat the serpent and seal him away, although Shiranui dies after. And then the game starts 100 years after this story, when Orochi is released once again by Susanoo, who is throwing a tantrum and recklessly does this by accident, and the world is kind of plunged into darkness. So the wolf Shiranui is called upon to come back and help defeat Orochi again, but instead a reincarnation of this wolf named Amaterasu, the sun goddess, is brought back in place. So over the course of the game, the player defeats Orochi with the help of Susanoo, and he can reunite with his lover Kushinada, and the village is saved. So there's a lot to digest here, but the main differences between these plots is the specific roles of each character. So in both tales, the battle with Orochi is one of the many main events, but not the whole story. It's defeated the same way and fought the same way, just kind of slightly different, as you saw. And here in the story, Izanagi and Izanami are seen as legendary predecessors, although they are mortal people in the game. And another notable similarity is that Amaterasu's powers as a sun deity are used to rescue people from darkness, and that Okami uses Orochi and the battle with him 2 times, both as a main villain, kind of like we see in the book or in the chronicle, and he's used in the prologue to set up Izanagi and Izanami as a sort of parallel. Now we can dive a little bit more into the characters themselves. And here I have laid out the Kojiki characters with their Okami counterparts, which you can kind of notice that physical features, weapons, and like clothes are replicated pretty well for the three characters on the left side. Kushinada did not have a Kojiki drawn counterpart, at least that I could find, and obviously Amaterasu is a little bit different since she's a dog. But something notable or noteworthy is that Kushinada, her reference sort of to her Kojiki counterpart is that her hair resembles a comb, which is a reference to how she was turned into a comb by Susanoo during his battle with the serpent. So I did use the Kojiki names for all of these characters, but here I'm speculating that the reason for keeping it so that only Amaterasu has her divine powers while the others are all mortals is to distinguish the player's abilities from other characters and to give you a significant role as the player that changes the course of the story, unlike any other non-playable character can. So Amaterasu is still pretty good-natured and very powerful, although she doesn't speak in the game, and she brings light into the world. And an interesting detail is that before she really helps anyone, she's heavily praised for her beauty and power in both Kojiki and in the game. Susanoo here is still thoughtless and sort of an outcast, and is also the descendant of Izanagi. And then again, we have Kushinada's exciting comb hair. So to finish off, I'd like to point out the small similarities in the settings. Both the book and the chronicle take place in ancient times in a very Japanese sort of location, which is emphasized by the game's art style. And the country of the game is Nippon, which is just another older way to say Japan. And the final destination of the game is the Ark of Yamato, which is again a reference to an old name in Japan that was used during the Nara period. So while these are small details, I think that the setting is really important in keeping a story grounded and whole by placing all of the narrative aspects in an environment that sort of complements them, which here we can see that the developers had a very acute attention to detail, and that even more elements are incorporated from the Kojiki into the game that players can learn about the original story. So overall, I see that I kind of see this game as a way to keep Japan's ancient cultural history alive. It teaches foundational cultural knowledge in a way that engages its audience and helps them to understand the story without the need for expensive educational databases or messy translations of ancient illegible languages. As I said before, the Kojiki was meant to bring Japan together under a more solidified cultural identity, which is demonstrated to be thoroughly successful just by the way that its story is still honored through every book, movie, and now game created about the Kojiki up until today. The localizations and remasters of Okami just go to show that the Kojiki still, even today, is spreading stories of Japan's origin on a modern global scale. Thank you.